Welcome to my ADHD Relationship Channel, your evidence-based guide to navigating love, friendship, and family life through the lens of ADHD. Today, we're talking about the 4 scientific reasons ADHD is missed in women and girls, and what I like to call the misdiagnosis trap. We're going to break down the 4 key scientific reasons this happens and how they create this perfect storm of medical oversight that can leave women and girls without a diagnosis for years, sometimes even decades.
So, I want to start with just a single number, 5. What do you think this represents? It's a number that, honestly, it reveals a huge disparity in healthcare, one that really stands for lost time, misunderstood struggles, and just years of waiting for answers. You got it. 5 is the average number of years times later women are diagnosed with ADHD compared to men. And remember, that's just the average. For so many women, this gap is much, much wider. Now, this isn't just some random accident. It's a systemic problem, and it's caused by some very distinct, scientifically proven factors that we are about to dive into right now. Okay, so to really make sense of this, here is our roadmap. We're going to set the stage with the misdiagnosis trap. Then we'll work through the 4 main reasons: how symptoms can hide in plain sight, this exhausting performance of trying to be normal, the trap of other co-occurring conditions, and finally, something that's so often overlooked, the hormonal wildcard. So let's really frame this whole problem. The reason so many women and girls go undiagnosed for so long is what a lot of researchers call a perfect storm of medical oversight. You know, it's not just one single thing, but it's this combination of factors that all come together, and they make getting a correct, timely diagnosis, well, incredibly difficult. All right, the first and I think most fundamental reason it all comes down to the symptoms themselves. See, ADHD in girls and women, it just doesn't look like that classic textbook picture we all have in our heads. It's often hiding right there in plain sight because clinicians, and really all of us, have been taught to look for the wrong signs. And this slide just lays it out so clearly. The typical male presentation is externalizing. You know, think of the little boy who's bouncing off the walls, being disruptive. It's impossible to ignore in a classroom. But the typical female presentation is internalizing. It looks more like being withdrawn or even depressed, or just inattentive. That daydreamer in the back of the class who isn't causing any trouble, she's the one who often gets missed entirely, which creates what researchers call a referral gap. And this quote from Dr. Patricia Quinn, wow, it just reframes the whole idea of hyperactivity itself. It shows how the exact same underlying trait can show up completely differently. A boy blurting out answers is seen as a problem to be solved, but a girl who's hyperactive by talking constantly, well, she's often just dismissed as being chatty, right? It's seen as a personality trait, not a symptom. And here's the thing. Women are way more likely to have the inattentive subtype of ADHD, which doesn't have that obvious, visible hyperactivity. Instead, the symptoms are things like struggling with details, forgetfulness, and that internal feeling of your thoughts racing a million miles a minute. It is a very real restlessness, but it's happening on the inside, so it's so much harder for the outside world to see. Okay, let's move on to our second reason because it builds right on top of that last point. This one is all about social pressure and the absolutely exhausting performance that's required to hide all those symptoms we just talked about. We're talking about masking. You know, ADHD masking is so much more than just trying to hide your symptoms. It's a full-blown survival strategy. Women often build these incredibly complex, elaborate systems just to appear neurotypical. And you know what? It can work, sometimes for years. But it comes at a massive cost, often taking 2 or 3 times the mental and emotional energy as their peers just to keep up. So why is masking so much more common in females? Well, a huge part of the answer is something called good girl syndrome. From the time they're little, girls are socialized to be compliant, to be organized, to keep their emotions under control. All that pressure teaches them to suppress any behavior that doesn't fit that perfect mold, leaving them terrified of being judged for their very real ADHD traits. And this path right here is just so common. It starts with developing those coping strategies. That often morphs into perfectionism, trying to overcompensate for any little mistake. Then, this constant performance creates this intense imposter syndrome, this deep fear of being found out. And eventually, well, the energy it takes just runs out. It becomes completely unsustainable, and it leads to total burnout. Okay, our third reason is what's called the comorbidity trap. Now, comorbidity is just a clinical term for when you have two or more medical conditions at the same time. In this case, it's what happens when ADHD is so well hidden that it gets completely misdiagnosed as something else entirely.
I mean, just look at this data. It is staggering. Almost half, 46% of women with ADHD were misdiagnosed with something else first. And get this, for 60% of those women, that misdiagnosis delayed their correct treatment by 2 or more decades. Can you imagine? They were treated for years, often with medications that didn't even help, because the real root cause was being completely missed.
And here's why that happens. The rates of other conditions happening alongside ADHD are just incredibly high. Look at this. A whopping 72% of adults with ADHD also have anxiety, and 62% have depression. So when a woman goes to a doctor, it's those more familiar symptoms of anxiety or depression that often get noticed and treated first. And this leads to this really interesting clinical phenomenon called diagnostic shadowing. It's like the symptoms of anxiety or depression are so prominent, so loud, that they cast a shadow over the underlying ADHD. The clinician treats what they see right on the surface, what fits that expected pattern. And the primary issue, the ADHD, just stays there in the dark, completely untreated. All right, let's move to our fourth and final reason, and this one is huge. It's so often completely overlooked in the diagnostic process, the hormonal wildcard. The role that estrogen plays in how ADHD symptoms show up throughout a woman's life is just, well, it's profound.
See, estrogen is a key player here because it helps manage neurotransmitters like dopamine, which is so critical for our attention and focus. This timeline just shows how big of an impact its fluctuations have. During puberty, symptoms can get worse. They often get harder to manage right before a period. Then during perimenopause, a woman's well-managed ADHD can suddenly feel completely chaotic. And for some, their ADHD symptoms only become truly obvious for the very first time after menopause, when estrogen levels are permanently low.
And the science on this is crystal clear. Research shows that when estrogen levels fall, it can predict a twofold increase. That's a 200% jump in both inattention and hyperactivity. In that week or so before menstruation, when both estrogen and progesterone are low, it creates what researchers call a double whammy for women with ADHD. It can be an incredibly challenging time.
So to pull it all together, those 4 scientific factors that create this perfect storm are the different ways symptoms present, that intense pressure to mask, the diagnostic shadowing from other conditions, and the powerful lifelong impact of hormones. Each one of these is a barrier on its own, and when you put them all together, it can feel insurmountable.
But, and this is the most important point, understanding this science isn't about getting discouraged. This knowledge is power. It validates the experiences that so many women have felt for so long but maybe couldn't put a name to. It proves that you're not making it up, and it gives you the language and the evidence you need to advocate for yourself in medical settings. And that really brings us to a final and, I think, critical question. Now that you understand the science behind why ADHD is so often missed in women and girls, how does it maybe reframe your own story? Remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel so that you know when new videos on my ADHD relationship are released. Thank you for watching, and we'll speak soon. Bye!